Afternoon, everybody. Today we're going to be discussing some major events that took place in Eastern Europe. It's summer of 1941, and huh? What? Oops! Sorry, folks. Wrong costume. King for a day to the end. There we are. We are dressed appropriately. This is how we dress for Uncle Joe. But we're not going to do this in Uncle Joe's voice because we want it to be serious. It's important stuff. So, 1941, summer. The German army had been building up in Poland for quite some time. For a long period of time, it's been well known in the Soviet Union that eventually they were going to be invaded. And come out through the month of June, what was taking place was there were actually deserters from German army going over to the Soviets saying they're going to attack. And they said, well, you just go and shoot him. He's obviously trying to stir something up. For whatever reason, Stalin wasn't willing to buy it. He kept thinking, no, this can't be right, this can't be right. Even though he had all the overwhelming evidence, he still hoped that there would be a diplomatic way to deal with this, that the invasion really wouldn't happen. And then it kept building up and building up and building up. All the correspondences coming in. I mean, everyone's warning Stalin that this attack is imminent. He's hearing it from the Russian spies over in Germany. He's hearing it from the British. Got it from Churchill. He even heard from revolutionary at the time, who was a revolutionary, Mao Zedong in Mao Zedong or Mao Zedong. I gotta mix up. Mao Zedong at that time in China, of all places, to warning him, say, hey, the Germans are about to attack you. And Stalin still was not very receptive to the whole idea. And at 4 in the morning, on June 22nd, 1941, over 3 million German troops marched across the Soviet border and attacked the Soviet Union in what was called Operation Barbarossa. Now all of the command in Moscow, they're getting all the reports in. Sevastopol's being attacked, Minsk is being attacked, Kiev's being bombed, and Stalin's in bed asleep. And Zhukov, who's the commanding in charge of the army, he gets on the phone calling Stalin's Dasha, as it was called, kind of a cottage, and just saying, you need to wake up Comrade Stalin, you need to talk to him now. And the secretary is terrified because he doesn't want to do it. He's like, oh, Comrade Stalin's not here. And he goes, well, Comrade Stalin's just asleep. I don't want to wake him up. He goes, well, someone needs to wake him up. And he finally comes back to several different people in the area, like Mikoyan and other people are just saying, I don't want to wake him up. You wake him up. They're literally playing hot potato on who has to wake up Stalin to tell him that his country's being invaded. That's that level of terror that Stalin has in his minions. But this also should show the level of control that dictators have over their people at times, because the scenario would play out quite the same way in that particular regard on June 6, 1944, with the Operation Overlord, with the Allied Anglo-American invasion of France. Hitler was sound asleep. Nobody in the German leadership wanted to wake him up. So they finally wake him up, and he says, okay, call a meeting at the Kremlin. And Stalin, he didn't believe it was legit. He kept going from the position of there's obviously some German general gone rogue. And as he putting it in my own words, he said, no, Hitler wouldn't attack us. Now, he basically thought that while they had their hands occupied with Great Britain until they were decisively defeated in the British, he said Hitler would not attack us. Hitler is not such an idiot. That's what he said. And so it didn't make sense, because the way Hitler did things, kind of on how his emotional and philosophical position, was very different than how Stalin did it. Stalin did very carefully calculated moves in the interest of the state. When it didn't make sense why to attack the Soviet Union the way he did. And Stalin wasn't buying it at first. He said, we're going to wait. We're not going to do anything. We're not going to provoke a war. And the generals are saying, they're attacking us. We're being bombed. We're being hit. They're hitting us in Riga. They're hitting us in all these different places. And Stalin said, we're going to wait and see if Hitler reels them in. Some German general obviously went rogue. I'm not going to be responsible for this war. And finally, a few days later, now I'm going to back up. Now, there's this mentality that is common. I don't know if this was the exact reason, but piecing together based on what I know of Russian and Soviet history, there's a mentality that's been there for quite some time, going back to the times of the Tsar, where, pardon me, they didn't believe, the people didn't believe that anything bad happening to them was because of anything the Tsar was doing. Hands are cold. It's cold outside. They said, I mean, the Tsar loves us. He said so himself. He's not doing all these bad things to us. Something bad's happening to us. It's because of some minion underneath him. He's the one doing it. The Tsar loves us. He wouldn't do bad things to us. And it carried on after the Soviet Union was established in the late 19-teens. And when things were happening under Stalin's 5-year plans, the collectivization, all these other bad things that were happening in the 20s, there were people actually who really believed out in the countryside that Comrade Stalin would not do this. He loves us. He takes care of us. He loves our people. Letters were flooding into the Kremlin because people just not believe, oh, Stalin obviously does not know what his minions are up to. They just didn't believe that would happen. And the mentality seemed to carry over where Stalin did not believe that Hitler would do something like this. There's obviously some minion underneath him being a dummy. And this also would continue, where in 1960, Nikita Khrushchev, what's called the U-2 incident, where an American spy plane was shot down over the Soviet Union in 1960. Khrushchev took the position of that his friend Eisenhower would never have authorized such a thing. Such a belief in infallibility of their leaders. And finally, about 4 days into the invasion, they looked at it and there were, I mean, the Air Force was in shambles. Many cities were already taken. They're closing in on Minsk, which is about a quarter of the way between where the invasion started and Moscow. And over 30 divisions, Soviet divisions, were completely shattered. That's when Stalin finally started accepting the gravity of the situation. Now, to show just the disarray of what's going on, no one knew who to blame or who was in charge, I'm gonna share a point because I can read it a lot better than I can say it. You know, some people don't always like you to read, but sometimes it comes out better when doing it. I need my glasses for this part because I can't see my paper. Now, this is between the Soviet upper brass on this one. They were arguing, and Zhukov, who's the commander of the army, he just says, "Comrade Stalin, have we permission to get on with our work? Are we perhaps in your way?" sneered Beria. You know, Stalin's enforcer of his secret police, the guy who butchers everybody and rapes every woman he can. And Beria, who was shocked to see Stalin addressed in such a way, the meeting now degenerated between a row between Zhukov and Beria, with the bristling Stalin standing in the middle. "You know that the situation on the front is critical. The front commanders await instructions. It's better if we do it ourselves," replied Zhukov. "We too are capable of giving orders. If you think you can do it, if the party tells us to, we will. So we wait until it tells you. As things have already been told to do our job." And they're going back and forth, because Zhukov says, "Okay, we're being attacked, let's do it." And Beryar's like, "No, we have to do it the proper way, through the committee." And so finally, Stalin heard enough of this, so he actually bumps in on Berya's side and slams Zhukov when he says, "What sort of chief of staff is it who, since the first day of the war, has no connection with his troops, represents nobody, and commands nobody?" The granite-faced Zhukov collapsed under this barrage and burst into tears, sobbing like a woman, and ran out of the room. Molotov followed after him. One of the harshest Bolsheviks comforted one of the most severe soldiers of that bloody century. Now, it's just to show how everything was just up in the air. Now, Stalin, about 4 days into it, he finally accepted the gravity of the situation. And the way they knew that, because he didn't show up. They're making decisions, and like, well, okay, what's happening here? 4 or 5 days into the invasion, Stalin didn't show up. He didn't show up the next day. And so Voroshilov, Malenkov, and I believe Molotov, they go out to his dasha, and they decide to sit down and talk to him. And Stalin's in there, and he took a collective position, actually, before he bolted. He just simply said, he said, we. He said, "We, Lenin founded our state, and we have effed it up." Now he's turning into a we situation, trying to make it collective guilt. So they show up at his house and go more from there. So I'm running way over time on this one. So I'll come back in a bit. There you go.